Oh, really? Okay, so if I was to give you, so this is 4.1. Today we're going to find zeros. So what we're finding when we're finding zeros is we're finding where it crosses the x-axis. So far we're able to find our, in fact, I'll do one that we can actually plot out. So far we can find, if I give you something like this, actually, x squared minus 1. You know that the horizontal asymptote would be what? If I have a smaller degree on the top and the middle.
Y equals 0.
Okay, y equals 0. And then the vertical asymptote here, I would set my denominator equal to 0, so I have x squared minus 1 equals 0. Yesterday we had, I think, this exact problem or something close to it. You would factor x squared minus 1. I'm going to show you another way you could solve for x right now, though. When you have x squared minus 1, I can get the x squared by itself. When I don't have another x, I just have x squared and a number. So I have x squared equals 1. And how do you undo a squared? Square root. Here's what you have to do when you're square rooting, though. If you get x equals, what's the square root of 1?
I don't know,
1. And it equals something else.
So you would
Negative 1.
that makes no sense.
It does too, because let's go the opposite of squared root, which is squaring. So 1 times 1 is
1,
negative 1 times negative 1 is
negative
negative 1 times negative 1
1,
is positive 1. Mrs. Hamilton is number
2.
1. See all the ones? See it?
I seen it too.
There's no 2s. It's all 1s. So when you do the square root, the point of this is when you do the square root, you have to have the positive and you have to have the negative of that number. So like, for example, if I did the square root of 9, I would say x equals
3.
and x equals
Negative.
-3. Is everybody with me on
Should there
that?
always be like 2 answers?
That's
When you've got a squared. Because if I were to factor this, it would have been x plus 1, x minus 1, which gives us x equals -1 and x equals 1, which is what we got here. So when you square root, you need to make sure to have a positive and negative. You don't have to do it this way. You can go back to factoring, always. You didn't have a choice on the bell ringer. You had to factor that one, because that was the x method. Exciting?
No.
Okay. So my vertical asymptote is x equals 1, x equals -1. The last thing we're going to find is what the 0 is, or where it's crossing the x-axis, or the other term that we've used is the x-intercept. So I'm just going to rewrite this down here. So that was a little blast from yesterday. So when I want to find the x-intercept, I'm going to replace the y with 0. What represents y up here? F of x. So I'm going to make this 0 equals 2x over x squared minus 1. What happens when I multiply this bottom part up here? What's x squared minus 1 times 0? Just 0. So when you're finding the x-intercepts, which is also known as the zeros, you just need to take the numerator and set it equal to 0. Is that how you spell numerator? T-O-R? Rator.
Rator.
That's what we're going to go with.
Looks about right.
All right. So you just take the numerator and set it equal to 0. When you're finding the vertical asymptotes, you take the denominator and set it equal to 0. So the numerator here is 2x. So I have 2x equals 0. So that means that x is equal to 0. So this is where it's going to cross the x-axis. This is one of the zeros. It's not an asymptote. It's an actual point on the graph.
So do you even have to work it out if it's always going to be 0?
And it's not always going to be 0. Let me give you another one. How about this one? If I give you f of x equals x plus 3 over x squared. all I care about right now is I'm gonna find the 0 or the point on the graph. So I'm gonna take the numerator, which is x plus 3, and I'm gonna set that equal to 0. And you get x equals -3. So this is the 0. When I say the 0, I don't mean a number. It's really just the x-intercept. Exciting?
Very.
That's really all I have. That's new today. So horizontal asymptote, you follow those 3 rules. Vertical asymptote, you set the denominator equal to 0 and solve. And for the zeros or the x-intercepts, you set the numerator equal to 0. Numerator. I'm not sure if it's ER or OR. Okay. Here is your assignment that you're going to add on to yesterday's, and I would like to go over it in class today. Page 337, 17 to 24. And then 25 and 28, you're only going to do f of x. And for all of these, I think I'm changing the... Okay, and for this part, you're just finding the zeros. The first part. The second part here, 25 and 28, I want you to find the 0, the x, not x-intercept, that is 0, the vertical asymptote, and the horizontal asymptote for 25 and 28. And only do f of x. There's an f of x and there's a g of x.
All right.
And we'll go over in class.